we're delighted to welcome Grenville Hancox to Morley. Grenville Hancox to Morley is a professor of music and well-being. Grenville has practiced, performed and advocated engagement in singing and health for over 30 years. And many of you will know Grenville as a marvellously musical motivator, living out in really practical ways the impact of music as a force for good within society. It's a real pleasure to have you here, Grenville, and we look forward to everything you're going to tell us.
It's a great pleasure to be here, and an honour, in fact, to be here, because we are in this hall celebrating one of the great female activating persons of the 19th century. And it's so appropriate that we should actually, as Andrew says, be following on from the roots that were laid here in terms of actually engagement with learning. We'll come on to that in a moment, but well, first of all, actually, there's some gaps in this auditorium. I want you to move. First of all, I just want you to move. If there's a gap, go and sit by somebody else. And then I want, first thing, second thing I want you to do is actually say hello to somebody you never said hello to before. If you could do that now, quickly.
Hello. I used to be at something new. Oh, right. I used to belong to the practical theatre school. So we used to perform and do shows.
By the fact that we've actually said hello to each other, and we are tapping into an evolutionary process which is about us being social beings. We are actually a social animal, and we need each other. And I could have gone on to actually suggest to you that instead of just actually saying hello, you actually preened each other. So we'll come back to that in a moment.
Well, that's involved, but anyway.
That's funny.
Feel safe in yourself.
All right, okay. So the second point is actually you've reacted in a way to that suggestion that you preen each other by laughing. Yeah? So our laughter is another important element that we're going to refer to a little while later in this talk, in this presentation. So if I shout 82, it's because that's the number of the person coming through the door right now. So the next one will be 82. So if I shout 82, that's why. You'll understand. And if somebody else comes in, it'll be 83. You got the idea? Fine, okay, fine. Excellent, okay. So, I, yippee, I, yippee, I, bonny, bonny, bon, my bonny, 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 bon, my bonny. Got it? Go. I, yippee, I, yippee, I, bonny, bonny, bon, my bonny, 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 bon, my bonny. Fantastic. Let's do it again. And go. How have you remembered that? It's quite extraordinary. I've given you a message which is pitch-based and actually language-based because we're using some syllabic structure. Yippee, we're using a form that's actually repetitive. And we're actually using a sort of sequence of engagement in notes that actually seems to be quite logical. 83! Hooray!
Mary.
That's a Mary in a minute, wasn't it? So, yippee, it's a repetition. Bonny, bonny, bon, my bonny, 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 bon, my bonny. Okay, so like a sort of phrase that is answered by another phrase, but they're both repeated. Right, good. I want you to sing it this time by altering in some way, your physical posture. If your legs are crossed and uncrossed, okay, just move your seat, your body rather, on your seat, so you just actually feel. And just now I want you to say, ah! Ah! Okay, now go, ah! Ah! Even more, go, ah! Fantastic. Okay, this time I want you to say, yippee, it doesn't matter if you take your arm out and sing. Go, go. Brilliant. Fantastic. Absolutely amazing. 84. 84? 84. 84, lovely. Fantastic. Good. So, we are really sophisticated beings. We can hear largely, if we've got good hearing, we're hearing, we're taking in a message, we're processing that some way, and our brain's actually instructing our vocal cords to 85 to actually make a pitch. And then not only make a pitch, but also sequence it in such a way that now you can remember it. So I want to try this experiment, please. Welcome. Thank you very much. I want you to experiment by just singing it silently to yourselves. Ready? Very good.
That's the John Page version.
Extraordinary. We can actually sing silently. We can hear inside our head. We can hear inside our brain. So which was quite clear, wasn't it? That pitch, that repetition, and use of 86. The use of those pitches. So what's happening? Here we go. Let's go first. Okay. So this is the Homo sapiens, that's what we are. We are very sophisticated developmental animals with a brain that we take for granted in its complexity and its ability to do what we expect it to do regularly. Next. So what was happening to our brain when we were singing? Let's have a look at the next slide. Here's an image of brains that are not necessarily working particularly well. C and D are those two. If you can see, A and B are two examples of healthy brains that are a healthy person, and a singer is B. So the structures, the little fonds and the connected ideas, strands are there. C and D are examples of somebody who's had a stroke and has lost some of the brain capacity. Letter C. Letter D is following there being musical intervention. So the part of the brain that's not working is still not working, but the part of the brain that is working better after musical intervention than it was before. Now, that's an extreme example then of what's happening to our brain when we're singing. We're actually flooding the brain with blood. We're actually finding it very difficult to think of anything else when we're singing than singing. Yeah? If you think about it, the starting point for a lot of the research that I've been involved in over the last 20 odd years started with a student at Canterbury Christ Church University called Rachel. She was a flautist, and she had to leave her job as a pharmacist because she had an obsessive compulsive disorder. And so she obsessed about the prescriptions that she was writing for people, so she wouldn't let go of that. So she'd go and visit people to say, have I written this 25 times for a day, or 4 times, 25 times a day, or whatever. That sort of obsession. And she said to me that the only time that she was released from this obsession was when she was singing with Sittingbourne Orpheus Choir on a Tuesday evening. When she was playing her flute, she can actually still think about something else. A lot of the time she could actually not, but at the time she'd be doing her scales and she could actually sort of be thinking of something else, and I can testify to that myself. I can sometimes listen to the Archers and play the clarinet at the same time. just to move the story on a little bit in that way. So, this idea then of the brain being completely activated by singing is really important. The next one, there. So, how we got here then? Well, of course, it's an evolutionary process that we've gone through. And our ancestors from the Australopithecus afarensis right through to Homo sapiens, where we are now, before us, the Neanderthal, actually have gone from quadruped to biped slowly. So our forebears were quadrupeds moving around on all fours, coming up to much more like what we have as our ancestors in terms of the apes, and then through to the Neanderthal, which looks very similar to us, and now Homo sapiens, where we are. So all the time, this evolution has been going on. Singing or sound making has been a fundamental part, the thing that's actually joined us, all these people. All these men and women have been joined by the fact that they've been making sound from 300, 400,000 years ago. So, two kinds of people we're talking about, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. And I'm concentrating on, or stopping about Neanderthals, because Neanderthals and Homo sapiens actually seem to be hardwired to sing. Hardwired to make sound in some way that we now consider to be singing of some sort. So I wonder if this is the case. So we go on. Thanks. So our ancestors, our quadrupeds, not far in advance of that march of man that I just showed now, were looking like this, or rather also sounding like this.
Groups of mothers and their young, gather together to form troops of up to 800 monkeys. Gelada's hands are usually busy plucking grass instead of grooming, so to keep in touch, geladas have become the chattiest of all monkeys. The gossipy banter can sound to scientists like sentences with words or even names for each other. Most agree it's often used to defuse tension. And in geladas, there's a lot to be tense about.
Okay, so the gelada baboon, one of their very close ancestors. If you notice that sequence that David Dunbar there, okay, large numbers of gelada baboons in a social group. Yeah? He mentioned about preening and eating. Yeah? Now what's happening, just like when we shook hands and when the gelada preens, is that their brains, our brains, are in some way activated. We have a reaction to each other in that way. So the gelada baboons, as our ancestors, when they were preening each other, were releasing chemicals in the brain associated with social bonding, associated with love, associated with cohesion of identity, all those elements that are there. So the endorphins being released in the brain in the gelada, similar to the endorphins being released with you when you're actually shaking hands or embracing or giving each other a hug or whatever it is. Physical contact, absolutely essential in that way. So the problem is, as you saw, that those large groups of geladas run out of time in trying to get round to preen each other, preen each other. Insufficient time to actually get round to each other. So we have to replace that element in some way. So the evolutionary process we'll be talking about is this. this idea of replacing the preening that allows us to express emotions, to actually develop the brain engagement, this has to be replaced with some other activity, because we become time short in this way. That's the next one. Now, we go back or go forward to the idea of the evolution from the gelada baboon to Neanderthal man. It's inconceivable, don't you think, that such extraordinary images that we are used to now seeing from, in fact, from different hemispheres of the world. The bottom left example is from an Australian Aboriginal painting. The one bottom right is from what we know now as France, Europe. And the famous one at the top is also from France. Of actually Neanderthal man or similar woman developing conceptually in such a way that actually identity is important. This is me. This is representation of me. One. And secondly, that actually they're aware of the environment and society around them. It happens to be made up of animals or creatures or mythological ideas. So the brain developing at a huge rate here. So the conceptual ideas of being able to refer to something other than themselves, refer to themselves in terms of the hand there, the handprint there, and then also developing the brain in such a way that imagination can take off as well. So myths and legends start to be created in this way. So it's inconceivable that level of sophistication could actually not be mirrored by the use of sound in some way. It just would not happen, would it? You can't imagine people actually sort of sitting around reflecting on the bison or the alligator or whatever creatures around and actually not being engaged in sound making in some way. So we go to the next slide. We have some potentially an example of what sounds might have been like with Neanderthal. Now, here's the problem. It's always the problem in music, isn't it? Always the problem in terms of sound, that we have to wait for many, many, many hundreds of years before we can record it in any way other than notate it. It's very difficult to record until we've got the machinery. So 100 years ago here, in fact, we're right on the cutting edge of being able to record sound in some way. And yet, Neolithic man, Neanderthal man, could actually record images on walls. So this research by David Lipman and people like that might suggest that exploration of caves, of the sorts of areas that would actually also have cave paintings on their walls, were absolutely ideal for sound making. So we hear this. This is a recreation. This is not, this isn't real. Okay, this is a recreation. Suggested idea. It could be, for example, entirely possible that Paleolithic cave artists initially chose spaces with non-porous stones because they were good canvases not only for paintings, but then subsequently discovered but they were also great locations to generate reverberant sound. So, let me just recap. We are hardwired for making sounds. Yeah? We come from an evolutionary process of brain development that has sound completely and utterly hardwired in its development there. And going out and using sound, or coming into the cave to use sound, was normal. Next one. So, singing Neanderthals were pretty cool people, I think. And this marvelous book by Stephen Mithen actually gives a great insight into the hypothesized world of the Neanderthal and what's happening with the development of the brain and the body. And if I just read a little section of this book by Mithen, he suggests this. One of the key aspects in the previous chapter was about the physical helplessness of human infants at birth. As I explained, the evolution of bipedalism resulted in a relative narrow pelvic girdle and hence birth canal, which limits the size of infants at birth, especially their brain size. To compensate, infants were effectively born premature and continued rapid fetal growth rates for the first year of life outside the womb. So if we think about it with Homo sapiens too, it's the case, is it not? We, that's mankind, ladies, you give birth to you infants, and the infant is essentially premature and is totally and utterly dependent. If we think about infant development, the rate of development in the first 12 months is absolutely incredible. Brain size, head size, body size, normally expanding developing at a huge rate in that way. Interestingly, away from quadruped to biped, we put the baby down. And the baby, of course, has no other way of communicating other than using sound. Intoning, using sound, very limited use of sound to be able to express every desire, every element of life at that moment. I'm in trouble, I need help, I'm hungry, I'm uncomfortable, I'm in pain, or through non-language based sound making. Yep. And what's our response? Our response is actually to go to sound. So we put the baby down and separate from the body, as opposed to the gelada baboon who's still actually having the baby strapped or on its back or whatever. We're actually putting the baby down and we respond to sound in that way. Okay, first thing. Second thing is that actually we respond to the sound by picking up the infant and then singing, making a sound in some way as a response to, if it's distress, actually starting to imitate the womb, maybe, internally womb, making sounds that have actually been familiar across the womb before the birth, or actually newly composed things that we now know as lullabies in that way. So this idea then of the baby, the infant, being absolutely dependent upon sound is within us all in that way, within us all. So, we've come along this journey, and by this time in our journey, we've got music is ingrained in our cultural, social development. Music as in terms of sound manipulation. Yeah. Because I'm talking cross-culturally, cross-globally, not talking about Western music in that way. The evolutionary process requires separation of premature human infant from another. Sound, the only means of communication from one to another. And development, therefore, of emotional language before conceptual language, before language as such. So we can say, ah. Let's all try it now, go. Ah. Okay, there you are. You see, you're well practiced in I. Isn't that a lovely baby? Ah. Oh, what a beautiful dog. Ah. Like that. And then we add another element to that. In fact, to make you sort of we use breath and laughter as a part of the reaction to another human being in that way. This man is an extraordinary researcher, Robin Dunbar. He's an evolutionary biologist who works at Oxford. And his work is absolutely staggering on the development of the human in all sorts of ways. But he's made some extraordinary discoveries and hypotheses about the importance of singing and dancing in terms of our development. And he develops this idea I just talked a little earlier on about the gelada baboon, running out of time. That the larger number of members of a group there are, then we run out of time. We have to replace the preening idea with something else. First thing. Second thing is that he developed what's now known as the Dunbar number, 150. 150, he suggests, Robin Dunbar suggests, is the maximum number of people you can have in a meaningful group so that you can just about be in touch. So his suggestion that people with Facebook accounts of 972 that can't really know each other terribly well in that way. And what's interesting, he makes the point about 150 is in the Doomsday Survey after the Norman Conquest, the Doomsday Survey, the villages in the majority of English villages were about 150 in total. There were some exceptions in Kent, and I think Fordwich was one of them, Roger, in that way. That were actually smaller than that, but 150 seems to be a very interesting number. So Robin Dunbar, I recommend him to you, and here's what he says about his research.
Through there, and again, we pick that up as the size of those connected areas, again, correlates with the number of friends you have and how good you are at mentalizing. So what this does now is essentially allow us to see both how you get this relationship between brain size and group size in effect, but more importantly, allows us to figure out what the mentalizing levels of different species of hominins are, at least. These are data from different species of monkeys and apes. It's plotting total amount of time, the percentage of daytime devoted to social activity against average group size for that species. And in general, there's a nice linear relationship. The bigger the group, the more time you have to spend socializing, although it kind of tails off. This is really under pressure from time budgets, because at the end of the day, all the rest of that time has to be devoted to feeding and foraging.
Right, okay. So, the point about that, are you all right?
Nothing's just that.
See, Joseph, by the way, thank you very much, Joseph, for sorting out the technical. Right. So Robin's making this point then, that we, foraging and feeding, preening, we're running out of time. Something's got to replace that. And his hypothesis is, and I think it's a really convincing one, is that we replace that preening with making sound, with starting to sing, and to dance, and to laugh. So we use laughter, dancing, and singing cross-culturally. So we, this is globally, Africa into Europe, in the development of mankind as we know it, is actually bursting out in these three important areas. Actually, laughter, dancing, and singing, which makes us human.
Capacity. So if these successive populations and these species of our ancestors up to us are having to find this amount of time, it's pushing them way above what time budgets they actually have. And what we think happened was they introduced, or we successively introduced, these 3 steps to fill that gap. And we think they came in, we now think they came in at these particular points here. Laughter with the appearance of early Homo, allowing that jump up that you see very dramatically here through the heavy lines here up to Homo ergaster. Singing and dancing essentially with the appearance of archaic humans, and finally the rituals, the religion, but very late.
Okay,
and
did
we
you just get that?
Suggest that simply because
the very latest thing that
religion, in that sense that you have rituals, requires language, and we think language is extremely late.
Exactly.
Probably not the...
So religion and ritual has to come after we've developed singing, dancing, and laughter, because it's language development, it's language dependent. Yeah. So we're anticipating the development of language by the use of singing. Lastly, just the last example of Robbins Dunbar's work is this whole idea of when we're singing, when we're laughing, we're actually releasing these endorphins in the brain, which allows us then to resist things like pain rather better than when we're not laughing or singing or dancing. So my original point about the brain being completely flooded with Rachel when she was playing her flute, was getting away from obsessive compulsive disorder. In the same way, laughter allows us to resist pain.
We're interested in endorphin release. Endorphins are part of the pain control system, but they don't cross the blood-brain barrier, so you can't measure them very easily directly without putting people to an awful lot of trouble and pain. So what everybody does in the pain industry is they use pain thresholds as a proxy for that. So we take a pain threshold measure, something like an old-fashioned blood pressure monitor on your arm. How long can you stand it? You do an activity, watch a video, or do an activity, you might be dancing or singing or something, and then retest for pain. If there's an increase in pain threshold across here, it's because you have had endorphins released. And so here's a summary of 6 different experiments we've done with laughter. They all involve an experimental group that watches stand-up comedy videos. So that's somebody like Michael McIntyre here, and they always do it in groups of 4 because people don't laugh when they watch the stuff. It's amazing. People are 30 times more likely to laugh at the same video if they watch it in groups of 4 than if they watch it on their own. It's an incredibly social thing, laughter. And then we want to have a control group which is completely neutral and produces no laughter. So what we found is the best one of the lot is golfing instruction videos. Well, most of these are done in the lab, except for this one. I really love this because we did it live at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. So this group were watching stand-up comedy shows, and this lot were watching little playlets, dramalets, non-humorous. But as you can see, in general, all the groups which were watching comedy laughed a lot, pain threshold increases, here's 0, no change. All the ones watching neutral videos, no laughter, pain threshold is either unchanged or has dropped, is negative.
Okay.
So, and we've shown exactly the same thing with dancing.
Exactly the same thing with dancing and singing and laughter. So pain threshold goes up. 100 years ago, remember that Andrew's reference to sighting in Kerwin and so forth here. Imagine that a different society, actually, which is experiencing a lot of pain in terms of all sorts of things. An example a bit later on, let's say in the 1920s, early 20s, of actually going down into the ground and digging up coal out of the ground for 12 hours a day. And what do men do when they come out? They spend 3 nights a week singing in that way. Or they sing, or we have an idea of saying we sing together, actually we're in a dangerous situation, to actually bring us together, to actually make us feel more secure, all those things. All related to the release of these endorphins and neurotransmitters, hormones from the brain, oxytocin, serotonin, cortisol, dopamine, and other endorphins in that way. So, we're reliant upon that happening without us thinking about it. We're reliant upon now replacing that because society's changed. We're reliant upon it because the time factor actually has changed, so we need to replace what we're doing, and singing and dancing are good examples of that. Okay, this is a massive leap in time then from where we've just been, pre-history, to where we are right now. And we're just going through this idea of, in musical terms, if you like, as we go from sound manipulation to making music, and I'm going to think about at the moment just a sort of Western tradition, just because it's convenient to do that. From a starting point at the top of the triangle, we had a very narrow field of expectation, style, development, whatever, to a huge, absolutely outpouring of difference to where we are right now. And yet the thing that actually cements all those things together, as a line going down the middle of that triangle, is the fact that we are motivated, we are affected in the same way as from the starting point as to where we're any place on the baseline there. So when Holst was here 100 years ago writing The Planets, okay, the emotion that he's able to convey in his music is actually the very same chemical process that's going on in our brain then as it is now. And so he's able to communicate an emotional response in us because of that whole physical engagement. All right, very quickly, we just go on then. So we've divided ourselves. We moved away from the idea, I think, that we've had for such a long time, until maybe Descartes, that mind and body was completely cemented together. There was no difference. It's a holistic view. And you know, if we look at a Greek example of great Greek philosophers like Pythagoras, who's absolutely captivated by the whole notion of sound and the relationship between sound, man, and the universe in that way. So musica mundana, the music of the spheres, the whole aspect of actually going outside ourselves and finding another world in that way, but also being absolutely captivated by the physical nature of sound and developing, for instance, the harmonic series, or noting how a harmonic series develops. And that Plato is relating the Pythagorean developments in sound to the whole idea of this connection between mind and body. And will not our musician, pursuing the same trail in his gymnastics, if he please, get to have no need of medicine, save when indispensable? So we can have a better quality of life, bringing together mind and body through the medium of something like music, through sound making, than we do now. A little bit further along the line then, William Byrd saying, the exercise of singing is delighted to nature and good to preserve the health of man. It's the best means to procure a perfect pronunciation. There is not any music or instruments whatsoever comparable in that which is made by the voice, and said singing is so good a thing, I wish all men would learn to sing, which is, I think, and one of the prefaces of Bird's Psalms and Sonnets, wasn't it? I think. So, a holistic view of the mind and body together. Here's a holistic view of mind and body, because we're going to jump a little bit further now and say, why music then, when we have mind and body sometimes not working like we would like it to in terms of the plan. Pimlico Skylarks, we're going to ask you to sing. Pimlico Skylarks is one of the founding groups of the organisation which we're actually launching officially today, called Sing to Beat Parkinsons, which I owe to my dear friend and colleague Roger Clayton here, who actually came up with this title, Sing to Beat Parkinsons. So thank you very much for that, Roger. Nicola, my colleague Nicola Weidenbach is now facilitating Pimlico Skylarks, and would you like to?
We actually have Pimlico Skylarks and Camberwell Skylarks. So there are 2 groups in it. Fantastic. We're not a choir, so I'm going to do an exercise with my guys, and I will, if you feel like it, get you to join in as well, but you don't. We're just going to start with A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Here we go. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Good. Can you make it the most exciting thing you've ever done? Can you do that for me? Here we go. Ready, go. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Good. We're going to A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Here we go. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Do you know it now? You got it? Here we go. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Brilliant, fantastic. You're not allowed to go yet. They're going to go first. Wait for it. Here we go. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? Early in the morning. Hooray, and up she rises. Hooray, and up she rises. Hooray, and up she rises. Early in the morning. So here we go. Right, let's put that all together. Here we go. What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? Early in the morning. Fantastic. Great. This side, I just want you to sing hooray, 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 early in the morning. Put him in the scuppers with a hose pipe on. Here we go. 1, 2. Put him in the scuppers with a hose pipe on him. Put him in the scuppers with a hose pipe on him. Put him in the scuppers with a hose pipe on him. Early in the morning. Hooray, up she rises. Hooray, up she rises. Hooray, up she rises. Early in the morning. This time we're going to put a beat in with us. I'm going to do a verse that we. So this we rehearse in a lovely community centre. King's, we actually are allowed to rehearse in King's College Chapel in the hospital. Oh. So this is a verse we're not allowed to do, which is put him in bed with the captain's daughter. I don't do this one because the clergy walk through occasionally. So we're going to do this one. Here we go, ready? We're going to get off beat going. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Put him in bed with the captain's daughter. Put him in the bed with the captain's daughter. Put him in the bed with the captain's daughter. Early in the morning. Hooray! Hooray, up she rises, hooray, up she rises, early in the morning. That's what you do with a drunken sailor, that's what you do with a drunken sailor, that's what you do with a drunken sailor, early in the morning. Hooray, up she rises, hooray, up she rises, hooray, up she rises, early in the morning.
Great, thank you very much. We needed to get research developed into singing and health, and so in 2001, Stephen Clift and I worked together on what has become actually quite a significant publication. We didn't realise it was going to be so significant when we wrote it, but it was about the perceived benefits of singing on health. And it was using an elected group of people who elected to be part of it because they were part of a choral group that I was directing. And so we repeated this exercise twice, and we found through qualitative research, that there were very similar responses coming out. And we were able to identify these areas on the right-hand side. Before that, though, I forgot to mention Mr. Kellogg of Cornflakes fame, who actually said this extraordinarily beautiful thing in 1932. I've been particularly impressed with the value of singing. It's not only a diversion and wholesome mental occupation, and on this account health promoting, but it is also excellent lung gymnastics and promotes not alone breathing, but the circulation as well. It especially aids circulation through the liver, stomach, and other digestive organs, and so promotes digestion. We should have that on every cornflakes. Every morning you should be reading that. Well, we hadn't read that at that time, but we came up with these 6 areas. The benefits for well-being and relaxation, benefits for breathing and posture, very similar. Social benefits, spiritual benefits, emotional benefits, benefits for the heart and immune system. All those things were captured in our qualitative analysis of the work. And so we set up a research centre based in Folkestone, funded by the marvellous Roger de Haan, now Sir Roger de Haan, and having written a pretty convincing, I think, business plan, he funded the research because his father had died from a form of dementia, and his father was wedded to music right until the end of his life. And so we set up this research centre to look at the particular use of singing with other areas of things. So what's come out of this is work that my colleagues have been involved in. Trish was coming today, but Matthew Shipton's here, been working on various areas of the use of singing as an intervention with people with singing mental health. We did the first randomized trial control ever of singing and the impacts of singing on mental health. Singing and COPD, singing dementia, singing and Parkinson's in that way. And those are all available online in this way. And then we repeated the first piece of research we did, we repeated on a very large scale in England, Germany, and Australia. And so we had now something like 1,300 participants, and using the same measures, the same qualitative analysis, the first results of that first initial research were actually compounded, and we found these particular things in the same way that we're coming out. So, in a minute, yeah. So we've got evidence absolutely written through research methodologies. We've got evidence carrying out, but we've also got wonderful practical evidence of the impact of singing as a very simple means of making the quality of life be improved. And when the quality of life is improved, it seems to me that the potential for the development of better health is there. And we've got a wonderful example here. Helena's here from Singing Medicine. And if you don't take anything else away with you from this evening, just take this away with you.
On Friday morning, Thomas woke up. It's sunny again. I can read my Bible with my dad today. It's sunny again. Antonio, it's sunny again. Antonio, it's sunny.
We're at Birmingham Children's Hospital today for our weekly Singing Medicine visit.
It's sunny again.
Singing Medicine is a singing project for children in hospital with life-limiting conditions. It aims to bring all those wider, wonderful benefits of singing to children in hospital.
How do you feel when you're singing, Dad?
How do I feel when I'm singing? It makes me feel happy and gets me excited. How do you feel when you're singing?
Very happy.
Very happy.
One little special song,
really good for our children because a lot of them are bedbound. Their parents can't always visit. For some of the children, that's quite appalling to have other children, they've got other commitments outside. So getting the singing teachers to come in and see their children is a really positive thing. And you can see their faces light up when they come around and sing songs.
Can you blink your eyes? Should we try that? Can you blink? Just like me. Can you blink? Just like me.
I think that it's the joy and the spirit of singing and people feeling lifted, and for a moment perhaps they can enter into that place of real pure enjoyment and sing.
Yeah, well, just take that. You say, yeah, absolutely, quite extraordinary. The impact of singing with really children who are really very poorly. We've got great examples, we can read that out and we've got time for this. But another example is actually music and the brain, working with Alzheimer's. Yeah. We've got the examples. We've got Parkinson's groups that we've set up. With Roger and I set up Skylarks.
Parkinson's affects people in different ways, but 50% of people with Parkinson's have trouble with their voice, and I'm one of them. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's nearly 7 years ago, and I do have problems with my voice, and that is the reason why I think Skylarks is such a good thing.
What's your name? What's your name? Little man. What's your name? What's his name? What's your name? What's his name? Harry. What's your name? What's your name? Notice the thing that's actually combining all these examples together is laughter. It's actually social engagement. All the things that we've been talking about in terms of the gelada, baboon, etc. So we're just taking that forward. We're taking it forward to now to Australia, and I'll be in Australia next week, working with this colleague, Yoon. We've been researching the impact of singing on the voice. How? With Parkinson's, how the voice is helped, benefited by regular singing. And so next week we'll be at Alderborough in Nicola with about 45 potential group leaders for more groups of singing to beat Parkinson's. Here's a very quick example of the impact of singing.
Okay. So, Malcolm, lovely afternoon. How are you?
Just great.
And we just had a good singing. What did you enjoy about singing just now?
It takes your mind off your normal health problems, and it brings you really out into the open and forget your problems. And when you go, it's like fresh and fresh air.
Oh, amazing! How amazing is that? And you've been coming to Skylarks for what, about 2 years now?
Yeah, for about 2 years.
And do you notice a difference between your voice now and when you came first of all?
Well, I don't notice, but other people say my voice has got a lot stronger now than whatever before.
4 different groups: Canterbury Cantata, Each Chorus, Monday Music. Monday Music is this weekly spiritual, physical, mental workout through singing. Yeah? This week 82 people came on a Monday between 11 o'clock and 12 o'clock just to actually feel better. Some people are really very well, some people not so well, and so on. So, as an example. And Sing to Beat Parkinson's, now registered worldwide as an organisation to do what it says, to try to make people's lives better, to improve the quality of life. So, our links and partnerships are developing. We've got them here at Morley, with the University of Kent, with obviously the Research Centre in Folkestone, Snake Maltings at Alderborough Music, with our patrons Matthew Rose, Mark Padmore, and now Christine McVie of Fleetwood Mac, helping us actually make the point that singing is the best thing. Other things are already on prescription. We've got smoking on cessation on prescription. We've got obesity on prescription. the Daily Mirror, for instance, suggests that overweight Brits are to be given free gym lessons for next one. And for Parkinson's, we have Lee Silverman vocal technique, which is an amazing impact upon speech development. And the National Health prescribes it, yeah? But it's very expensive because it's one-to-one. It's 4 times a week for a month. Is that right, Roger? 4 sessions? Yeah, so quite expensive. Qualitative evidence suggests us that singing can have not the same necessarily, but as effective way of encouraging development of the voice and increasing the voice. And that's what we'll try to release that suggestion next week in Australia. So, my conclusion is the way forward is 1. Music is a powerful but underused tool, not only for people with dementia, but for us all. That was last week's report. Secondly, we need to lobby. We've got to go out and tell whoever it is, GPs, commissioners, friends, relations, politicians, that we need singing. We need to create a Facebook petition from tonight so we get 10,000 signatures for Get Singing. We need to tweet. Tom's just learning to tweet, thanks Tom. And we need to ask, and why not singing on prescription? Thank you very much.
Lecture. I said we were on the clock, and that has been the case. But we will invite you back, of course. There's so much more to say. We'd love to have you back. I hope you'll be able to join us in due course. And could I recommend that we perhaps continue the conversation, if you'd like to, over in the gallery. There's a fantastic exhibition on at the moment. The gallery has remained open so that we can visit it if we'd like to, and perhaps we could have a few questions perhaps in the gallery if we'd like to continue. So thanks so much. Thank you for being around.